Right guys, so today we're going to be doing a GS430 2000-2005 going into a US IS300 2002 to 2005. So let's get into it. Right, as I said, this is a 3UZ from a GS430 2000 to 2005 model. So it originally came with a 5-speed automatic gearbox. This one's going into an IS300. I call it the 02 to 05 model, and that's because they had another variation which was from 2000 to 2001. So only the US got the two variations. In Europe, we didn't get those two variations. Okay. This one is going to be using a manual gearbox, specifically a CD009, so we'll go through that when we look at the new wiring that we've added in. But as you can see, it is a completely adapted harness, so we've taken the original harness, we've stripped it completely down, removed everything that's not necessary, repaired anything that needs repairing, replaced any connectors that need replacing, and obviously we've added in all the new wiring that we require for the swap. So what we're going to do now is let's cut through and take you through that process so you can see exactly what we do with these harnesses. Right, so there you go. You can see exactly what goes into prepping these harnesses and adapting them for the plug and play swap. Okay, right, so if you watch any of other videos, it's going to be really straightforward. We're going to carry out what we would normally do, and the first section is going to be the layout. So we're going to go from the ECU box all the way around the harness, show you where everything plugs in so the customer has an easy time of fitting it in their vehicle. Then we're going to cut to the testing of the harness, and we split it into two sections, one with just the ignition on and one with the engine actually running. Okay. So to start with the layout, let's go to the ECU box over here. Now, obviously, this is a bit of a mess because, again, I'm converting. This is an IS200 that I've cut in half to make it all stand. So, again, I'm converting from IS200 to 02 to 05 IS300 US, and then obviously to the actual ECU itself for the GS431. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly show you what it looks like when it is actually all in and nice and neat. There you go. So you can see exactly how everything looks when it is actually going to be in the vehicle and obviously ready for the lid and everything to go on. So obviously looks really nice and neat when that happens. Okay. Right. So first of all, as the customer has an IS300 from 02 to 05, this ECU is going to drop straight in. No adaptation or anything required there because they had the exact same shape in the second generation IS in the US. Okay. But if you've seen it in my other videos and you know when we do the IS200s, if you're ever in a situation where you have this ECU shape and you have either an IS200 or a 2000 to 2001 IS300 in the US, basically all you can do is effectively grind this little lip down and it slides directly in there. Bit of a tight fit, but it slides in there and it holds itself nicely in place. So really, really straightforward, nothing too strenuous there. Okay, so moving on, ECU side, we've got 3 connectors that are over there. All keyed differently, so you can't get them in the wrong place, so don't stress about that. Plus, obviously, the way the wire is routed, obviously, it dictates as to where they go. Next up, we have the 2 what I call the body plugs. Obviously, we've got some wires from the body plug going into the harness, and that's why we make this little patch resin over here, so we can interface with the IS300 ECU connectors. So these are the ones that are left behind in the vehicle. obviously when you pull the 2JZ out. All right, so that's the ECU side. All 5 plugs are different. You can't get them in the wrong place, so you don't have to stress about that at all. Just plug it into where it goes into. It won't go in where it can't go in. Okay, right. Moving along to here on the resin, we then have our little tacho device. Okay, so again, with the 1UZ and the 3UZ VVT-i engines, and even the 1UZ non-VVT-i, the RPM signal, or the tacho signal that comes from it, is a 4-cylinder signal. Okay, that dates back to the old original 1UZ non-VVT-i, because they basically used 2 igniters, 2 distributors, 2 coils. So effectively, the only signal they could get out of that was a 4-cylinder signal. They seem to carry that on. So even though the RPM signal is coming from the ECU, it's not an 8-cylinder. It is actually a 4-cylinder. I'm sure there's a multitude of reasons for that. For instance, you can share the same internals from a 4-cylinder Toyota with the 8-cylinder Toyota in terms of the rev counter. Okay, but anyway, so the new addition that we've done here is we've actually made this on a separate plug. And basically the reason I started doing that is because obviously we have access to these ECU headers here, so we can quite easily make a patch to an aftermarket ECU. If you're running an aftermarket ECU, obviously you don't need this tacho device. So the idea is you can unplug this. We basically bridge the 2 tacho wires in there. And then obviously your aftermarket ECU can output the correct tacho signal for the cluster inside. So again, really nice and straightforward. And it means obviously you guys can then take this off, and then it becomes a unit that you could possibly sell to another customer of ours. Again, completely up to you guys. Okay. So that's the resin side done. So that's everything that's going into there. Now, in terms of the body plugs, in this case, we have 4 body plugs that we are dealing with. So we have this one over here, which goes normally into that slot over there, if you can see my fingers pointing. We then have this plug over here, which again would normally go into that gray slot over there. We then have this white plug over here, which would normally go in there where that black one is. Obviously, in his case, he's going to have a white junction connector, not a black one. Okay, and then lastly, we have the blue connector here, and that is going into the blue connector over there. Okay, now what you'll notice is basically, if you look at the IS300 02 to 05, they did have a manual gearbox version. So although in this case, we are not actually using a speed sensor because they all came from the ABS ECU. I have actually put all the wiring in there. So this customer ever wanted to sell it to somebody who had an IS300 that was a manual, then obviously the signals would come through there, okay, and work as per standard. So again, I include everything as per normal, so that again, not limiting you if you ever wanted to sell the harness on in another location. Obviously in this case, because it's using a CD009, we don't have a speed input, and luckily obviously the speed comes from the ABS ECU. So it should be relatively straightforward from there. But yeah, I like to keep everything in there. So we still got the 4-pin connector on there. So we still have all the connections for a speed sensor and a reverse switch as per standard in there. Okay, but those are your 4 body plugs there. Again, completely unique. You can't plug them in the wrong place, so don't stress about that. Really straightforward. Just plug them in where they go in. Nothing else to worry about. Okay. Then lastly, inside the ECU box, we just have these 2 junction connectors that form part of the engine harness. So again, they can clip into these little slots down here. Okay, and again, one can clip in, other one can sort of be tucked away. It's really no drama there whatsoever. Right, so that's the ECU side, really straightforward. 5 ECU plugs. You plug in your 2 plugs that are left behind when you take the IS300 out. You plug in your 4 body plugs, and that's it. Put the grommet inside the slot there, put the lid on, and away you go. Okay. Right, moving along from there, we then have the grommet, which I said obviously goes in that slot over there, which again keeps everything nice and waterproof. Moving along from there, we then end up at our first piece of plastic that keeps everything together. And I think we replaced this one because I think this one was in pretty bad shape, all cracked and broken. But anyway, so that is the little plastic section over there. The first section that breaks out of here is going to be injector 1, which you can hopefully see there. See if I can get it to the injector 1 and coil 1. So before I go too far, just remember with these UZ engines, the left bank, because you're always looking from the driver's position, this is the left bank, that's the right bank. The left bank is odd numbers, so it's cylinder 1, 3, 5, and 7. The right bank is the even one, so it's 2, 4, 6, and 8. Okay, just so that you know that that is how it works. And sometimes that can be referred to as bank 1. So this would be bank 1 here, because it's got cylinder 1. And that can be referred to as bank 2 with cylinder 2 at the front over there, if you want to try an easy way to remember it. Okay, right. So again, injector 1, coil 1, that pops out the side over there. Moving along to the front here, we then have the little breakout section that comes here. First thing that pops out is your oil control valve for the left bank or bank 1. Okay, so again, VVT-i engine, but only VVT-i on the inlet cam, not on the exhaust cam. They only did exhaust VVT-i on the later generations, the GR and the UR. They obviously have inlet or VVT-i on both the inlet and exhaust cams. On these ones, just on the inlet cam. Okay. A little bit further down, and then it pops off and it goes to the TPS sensor over there. So remember, this is a 3UZ 5-speed model. So it has a throttle body with 2 connectors on. You've got the 2-pin one at the top there, and you've got the TPS over here. Okay. Moving a little bit further down there, and we break out and go to our cam sensor. So again, on the 1 and 3UZ VVT-Is, we have 3 cam sensors. Okay, we have this one at the front, which is a single tooth, which is red on the cam there, and that's what the engine would use to synchronize position. The other cam sensors, which we'll get to in a minute, but they're on the inlet cams, and obviously they're for measuring what the inlet cams are doing in relation to what the ECU is commanding from the VVT-i system, okay? So those cam sensors are actually measuring 3 teeth. So if you ever had this cover off and you've seen the cam there, there's 3 teeth on those cams, and there's a single one on this one. So this one can be used just for engine position. So again, you've got your 36-2 trigger wheel on the crank. You've got your single tooth on the cam. Done. And there you can do that. Then you can use those 2 over there to actually measure how much degrees of advance or retard the cam is doing. And obviously the EC then uses that to say, I've asked for X and you're giving me Y, not X. There's a problem there somewhere. Okay. Right. Moving down, you'll see that there is 2 places to clip everything down. Excuse my clips, it's just clips that I can put in there and easily get in and out because I'm taking harnesses in and out all day. So that's fine, but it moves along there, clips inside there to keep it away from the belts. And then we have our AC compressor connector, which pops out over there. So remember, the AC systems with these plug and play setups do work, but do bear in mind they have to be complete and intact, and everything needs to be working. So there's a pressure switch in the front that needs to all be intact and working. So this will work exactly as though Toyota intended. Okay. So there's nothing funny about that. It just means that if it's not working, probably there is a reason why. And then you'll be looking at things like your pressures and so on and so forth, your pressure switch, and make sure everything there is great. Okay. Also coming out here, we then have our oil pressure switch. Okay. Now, this is obviously an LS430 engine. That's why it's got the mid sump or whatever you want to call it. And obviously the oil filter housing coming out the front here. Okay. So that's why our oil pressure switch is over here and not facing backwards like it will be on the GS430, because that was a front sump and this oil filter housing goes backwards, and that's the one you always need when you're doing an IS200 IS300 swap, because this one would knock into your bar that runs across the front over here. So this one doesn't work on an IS200 300 swap. Okay. Then also coming out here, which I put down through here, so you've got a hole that goes in there and then it comes down, goes through there, pops out there, and that is your crank sensor. Okay. Again, every plug is different on here, so you can't get the wrong thing in the wrong place, so don't stress about that. But yeah, I always take the crank sensor through there. If you've got the AC pump here, you can actually do it. Just push it down through there and then it pops out there and you can plug it in there. Oil pressure switch would obviously go down and then towards the back, because the oil pressure switch is going to be facing backwards, and obviously the AC clutch is right here. So that goes into there. Okay. Right, so that's that section over there. Let's keep on moving along. Okay. So again, this piece of plastic mounts here and here with a bolt. Really simple, straightforward, 10mm socket, M6 bolt, obviously. Boom, goes in there. Then we move along here and you'll see this is a short section where it's not covered in plastic over there, and that's also obviously been taped up nicely there. And we get to the second piece of plastic, and that is bolted here and here. So really straightforward, nothing too major there. But we have 3 sections that pop out over here. So let's start going through them. So the first section over here is going to go to injector 3 and coil 3. Okay. It's also going to go to your cam sensor for the inlet cam on the left bank, or VV1 as they call it. Also coming out here is your evap solenoid. So again, because it's an IS300 plug and play, you can basically just plug that directly in there, and then your original evap pipe that came up there on your IS200 or your IS300 would then just plug into this evap solenoid over here. Okay, so again, simple, straightforward, just plug that in directly there. Okay, moving along to the next breakout section, it's then going to be injector 5 and coil 5, and then your noise filter. So this is a noise filter. It's basically a capacitor. It's bolted to the cylinder inlet, obviously to get its ground, and that is to reduce electrical noise in the system. So obviously as your injectors are firing, as your coils are firing, you're creating electromagnetic interference. This obviously absorbs all of that, which then keeps that noise away from things like your oxygen sensor wires, your NOx sensor wires, your camshaft sensor wires, your crank sensor wires. Not that that's a problem obviously here, but obviously all of these wires travel through the entire harness as they go through there. Okay, so that's what that does over there. Right, moving along to the next section at the back over here, and that is obviously going to go to injector 7 and coil 7. Okay, so really straightforward. You can see how they've laid it out at Toyota, so it's really easy to know. Obviously, this is not going to reach to there, and that's not going to reach to there, and vice versa. This might reach to there, but obviously that wouldn't reach to there, so you'd know you made a mistake straight away. So again, really straightforward, really easy layout, nothing to worry about there. Okay. Right, then we get to the end and we have a little section again here which is uncovered, and we get to our black plastic section at the back here that's keeping all the harness together over there. This one is very simple. There's only two places it mounts, which is that bolt over there and that bolt over there. See if I can get it to focus. That bolt over there. So just those two bolts hold this piece of plastic down, keeps it all nice and in shape. No worries there, really, really easy to fit. Okay. Now, moving down from there, we then have our first breakout section, which goes through over here. Just move that out of the way. Okay, coming out of here, we then have our earth strap, which goes onto, again, another M6 bolt, so a 10mm socket on that one. Just remember, guys, that aluminium has a tendency to rust and it creates like a little fur. That can cause havoc with the earthing. So please, before you bolt this down, make sure that you give it a bit of a clean with some emery cloth or something. Make sure you got a nice clean surface to attach that earth to. And that applies to everything else as well. Even the block is aluminium, so when you attach the earth to the block, make sure you give it a good clean before you do that, so you're not chasing weird issues, which earths always cause. Right, then we've got our Lambda sensor, which pops down through there, goes down to the bottom over here. Let me see if I can pull it up. Oh, there you go. So there's the Lambda sensor over there. Obviously, I've tucked it away. And what I would say to you guys is there is a heat shield which bolts to the block, and that connector goes behind it, and that protects that connector from the exhaust. So please make sure that heat shield is in place, because that connector will obviously drop on the exhaust, it'll melt, and there's a positive and a ground in there, and if that shorts out, everything's going to shut down because it's the same power that supplies the ECU. Okay, so just make sure that that is protected on there and you have that heat shield in place, so you're not ending up with that touching on the exhaust, melting, and then obviously breaking. Okay, right, next up is one of our first new sections. That's popping down to over there, and that is going to your gearbox. Okay, so again, as I said, we keep it standard. It's 4-pin connector in there, so we have both the speed sensor and the reverse switch in there. As I said, everything goes to the blue plug as if it was an IS300 manual 02 to 05. So again, really straightforward. If you have an IS300 02 to 05 auto, obviously those two pins won't actually be in there, but yeah, I always keep it there so it's nice and standard, so you're not limited to who you can sell the harness to. Okay, in this case, he's just using a reverse switch, which we've got over here for the CD009. So that is over there, and that runs straight down the gearbox, plug into the reverse switch. And that's all he's going to have on his gearbox, because there's no speed sensor on a CD009. Like the BMW gearbox, there's no speed sensor on there. Okay. Then next up is going to be our accelerator pedal. So again, everything is labeled for you guys there, because obviously we make these brand new. So again, 6-pin connector there, goes along from there, and then it's going to plug into the accelerator pedal. Okay, so obviously this is an American car, so this is a left-hand drive vehicle, so that's why everything is coming out here, so everything can go inside there. Okay, right, so you probably noticed on this harness over here, which is normally attached to obviously the starter harness, which has your main starter cable, which obviously goes to the part of the battery, is brand new. So in this case, the customer didn't send his original harness that went under the intake, and he's opted for us to build a new one just in case there's any issues on his side. So again, this is all brand new. We've labeled it sub over there. Obviously, it just goes into the plastic over here, and then it goes underneath the intake, and I'm just going to cut to some photos now. So there you can see there's the whole harness, and then it goes to the starter solenoid, and then it goes to knock 1, and then it goes to knock 2. Right, okay, so you can see it's all brand new, so obviously it's all labeled for you guys. Just be aware, as I said, knock 1 refers to bank 1, so knock 1 is going to be on this side, and knock 2 is going to be on that side over there. So just make sure you get that correct. And also, guys, make sure if you are replacing knock sensors that you put them to the correct torque, okay? They are a speaker, so if they're not tightened to the correct torque, they can obviously make noise when they're not supposed to, and you might end up with the engine pulling timing thinking it's got knock, but in actual fact, it's just literally that the knock sensors are not torqued down correctly. There's plenty of files available. I've got a file of all the torque settings for the entire engine, which includes the knock sensor, so if you need that, please let me know, and I can fire that over to you, okay? Right, so that's that, and then obviously he'll already have his starter cable in there. And obviously, because it's an American version, it's going to be going to the correct side, because obviously the battery is on that side on an American vehicle, obviously, as well as the fuse box, which we'll get to in a minute when we get to the alternator. But fuse box, battery are going to be on that side. So as you can see with the 3UZ cables, although they are slightly different, the plastic seems to be the same because they've got the plastic going off that way. So you can obviously connect to a battery on the right-hand side of the vehicle. Right. So let's move around to the other side now, because we're going to carry on from there. Right, fantastic. So again, plastic just carries along the back here. We've got our mounting point over there, and then popping out over here, we then have our second earth strap that needs to be bolted to the cylinder head. So same applies as the other side. Give it a good clean before you bolt it down. Obviously, you won't have any other bolts in here. You should only have the M6 bolts in your engine because it was a 3UZ. These are obviously for a 1UZ. Obviously, I use this engine for both, so I've got bolts in there, but you shouldn't have a bolt there, only that one over there, okay? Right, moving along to there, then we get to this edge over here, and the first breakout section is going to be injector 8 and coil 8. So again, really simple and straightforward, nothing too strenuous there, okay? Then the harness moves along, and we have another breakout section over here, and there's going to be 3 things that break out over here. First is going to be the ACIS valve, or acoustic control induction system. It's a vacuum solenoid valve. These are the 2 wires that come from under the intake from there. So when you are obviously fitting everything, including to get access to that starter knock harness that goes underneath there, obviously you can remove the entire intake with just the 10 bolts that are at the bottom of the intake, and you can lift the whole thing up. So it's not too strenuous to do that. Obviously it's easier when it's out the vehicle because you're not bending over trying to pick everything up. But yeah, when you have that up, the best thing to do is look underneath. There's a little brown vacuum solenoid valve. And basically what you want to do is you want to supply it with 12 volts on ground, and you want to hear it click, okay? Now, in this case, you can see here that there is a thick white wire and a blue with a white tracer in there, okay? The thick white wire is 12 volts, and the blue with the white tracer is a ground, okay? So just check when you check on your harness. In this case, the black is 12 volts and the white is ground. So just supply the voltage, and obviously they are polarity sensitive, so they only work one way. So again, just test that valve before you put everything back in, because if it is broken, now's the time to replace it. You've already got the intake off, because you don't want to put everything back together and find out your ACIS doesn't work, then have to pull everything off again when you've actually got the harness and everything on as well. Not a fun time to be had, okay? Just make sure you test that before you put the intake back on again, okay? And then also coming out here is then going to be obviously injector 6 and coil 6. Okay, I'm just going to bend down a little bit here. Right, okay, so then we move along a little bit more. All right, and then we get to our next breakout over there. Okay, let me see if I can do it from here. Right, now, as this is an American harness, there is something that you wouldn't find on a European harness, and that is a CCV connector in there, okay? Now, obviously, I do leave all of that stuff in there because there are certain states that is required to have that type of stuff. Obviously, with the remaps, we can get rid of all of that stuff. But obviously, if you wanted to have someone who sell it on to somebody who needed all of that stuff, it is all still there and connected. Okay, so obviously, I don't like to remove it if we don't need to. So in your case, you can just tuck that away neatly behind there and forget about it. But it is there if someone else needs it. Okay. Then we have our second noise filter. So again, just a capacitor. Goes in over there. Now, obviously, there's usually like a bracket over here that holds the cover on, and that's where that bolts to. So this looks a little bit funny here, but obviously, I'm just bolting it to what I have on the cylinder, on the inlet manifold there. Okay. And then, obviously, at this section as well, we have our cam sensor for the right bank, and we have injector 4 and coil 4. So you get in the picture here, it goes boom, boom, and then boom through there. Okay. Right. Then we move forward. So as you can see, we move straight down over there, and it's going to break out again here at the front. Let me get it to focus there. Okay, quite a few things come out here, so let's go through them. First of all, we got injector 2 and coil 2, so that's really nice and simple. We then also have our coolant temperature sensor, which you can see down in there. We then have our oil control valve, right, for the right bank. So again, same as the one that's on the left bank over there. We then also have our wire for the throttle body. So there's your 2-pin connector over there. So that's the positive and negative for the electronic throttle body. And then while I'm here, we also have the section that breaks out for your mass airflow sensor. Right, usually it came out like quite far down here, but I pull it all the way back to there to bring it out. So again, when you're doing swaps, you don't always have the space or ability to run sort of standard airboxes. So I always like to make sure you've got plenty of room that you can then put the mass airflow sensor where it's going to be most convenient. So again, this gives you quite a lot of extra length on that so that you don't have to worry about stretching it or whatever. Okay. Right, so that's that section over there. We then carry on for the last section, which is going to pop down over here and come down towards the bottom over here, and we have our last breakout over here, which goes basically to the 3-pin connector for our alternator. It's then going to go to our oil level sensor. So again, that goes into the sump over there. Again, obviously the customer's got a GS430, so his is a front sump, so that plugs in over there. On the LS430s with this mid sump, it actually is oil level sensor on the other side of the engine. And again, these sumps don't work on IS200 or 300 swap, okay? And then lastly, we have our Lambda sensor over here. Okay, and that slots into a bracket which goes up there, super straightforward. Okay, now something to be aware of with the Lambda sensors on the 3UZs is there's 2 different ones with 2 different part numbers, and they are different. Okay, so this side on the right bank, you have a long harness actually on the Lambda sensor itself. On the other side, you have a short harness one, okay? Now, they are different. I have tried. If you plug this one into that one, you get a heater circuit error, so the wiring is different between that one and that one. So please make sure that you do get the correct one. And down in the description below, I've put a whole bunch of part numbers of a whole bunch of things, timing belt kits, injector seals, etc., etc. So if you have a look down in the description, you're going to see a bunch of part numbers for a 3UZ parts that you can then go and buy and do whatever you need to do to replace it. Because obviously we recommend things like, you know, timing belts and all of that should be done as part of a swap. Obviously, if you've got a history of the vehicle, that's great. But I never trust anything. So I would always obviously swap out the timing belt, etc. if I was going to do this. Okay. Right. That's pretty much it. So really, really straightforward. It just makes a U shape around the engine. Bolt the plastics down, which is what I do first, and then I go around and plug everything in. So it's really, really simple and straightforward, okay? Now then, things that are not part of the engine harness that you do need to connect. So number one, on your battery, which in your case would be over here, you've got your negative or ground terminal. It goes down under the battery, bolts to the chassis, and then it goes down to the block, okay? So you want to reattach that one, because that one is obviously going to be the ground for your starter motor, hence it goes directly to the battery. Underneath, there's also the ground for the entire vehicle. So if you've got the engine out and you want something to do, lift up the battery, undo the tray, make sure where that's bolted to the chassis is completely clean, rust-free, and has a really good connection, okay? Because that's the only earthing point for the entire chassis of the car, and obviously everything inside works through that earth, okay? So just make sure it's clean while you're in there. And it's, again, it's free, it doesn't cost you any money. You just pull the battery out, pull the tray out, have a good look, make sure everything is okay. Right, so that's your main earth. It comes from the battery down there, goes to the block. Fantastic, right. As I've been through the starter cable, which his one already has, he's just going to take this, he's going to pull out all the old one, take this and shove it in there, and then obviously connect that up to the positive of the battery. So in his case, his one obviously comes out this way and goes to the battery, which is over here. All right. That is the main power for the starter. It doesn't go to anywhere else, straight to the positive terminal of the battery. Really, really straightforward, okay? Another problem I come across as well is if you take a look at this, you'll see that there is a wire coming down there and it's going into the fuse box. Now that is the entire power for the vehicle. Okay, I've had tons of people, they completely forget about that one and they don't connect it. Now usually what tends to happen is that goes underneath the starter one, and obviously they bolt on top of each other, and there you go. So again, just make sure that you do fit that one, because if you don't, then obviously the vehicle's not going to have any power, and that's not going to be fun, because obviously nothing is going to come on, nothing is going to work. All right, so we've got the fuse box power and the starter motor power, okay? And the same applies whether it's left or right-hand drive, you've got exactly the same setup. And then lastly, which is nice on the left-hand drive vehicles, is your main alternator charging cable. So that's this one that bolts on over here. So I'll just get that off over there. Right, so that bolts on directly over there. It normally, on a right-hand drive vehicle, goes down across the subframe, pops up there, and it goes into the fuse box over there. So you can see that little L-shaped bracket over there, okay? So that's something that's not included in the engine harness. It just doesn't come in the engine harness, even on the standard vehicle. So that's something you need to add. So just make sure that what you are doing is you're going from the alternator to the fuse box. Don't go directly to the battery, because if you look at your fuse box, you'll see there's a 120 amp fuse there for your alternator. Okay, so again, really nice to have. You want to limit the amount of stuff that's connected to positive that isn't fused. Okay, so in this case, if you set it up correctly like that, the only cable that's going straight to the battery without any fuse at all is your starter motor cable. Okay, alternator goes through there, has a fuse. If your cable ever gets caught on something, stretched, touches the chassis, grounds out, the fuse will blow. Boom, no fires, which is absolutely what you want. Okay, but right, that's it. So harness plugs in, everything plugs inside the ECU box. Really simple. You're going to have your earth coming down from your battery to your block. You're going to have your alternator cable coming from there to the fuse box. You're going to have your starter cable coming from there to the battery. And then the last thing you can do if you want is, if you look at your firewall on the 2JZ, there was earth coming from there to the cylinder head. You can do exactly the same thing, and you can just bolt it to one of these bolts over here. So again, this is an M8 size, that's an M6. All right. So again, you can bolt that from there to the firewall. Easy peasy, and it just gives an extra earth, which Toyota loves. And then lastly, if you look at the gearbox on the original IS300, there was just an earth braid, like a non-insulated earth braid that ran from one of the gearbox bolts to the chassis leg. I would advise to connect that up again, because you cannot have enough earths on a Toyota. You will always find weird earthing issues with Toyotas, and it is a nightmare to fault find. So again, put those 3 earths on, you should be absolutely fine without any major issues. Okay. Right, so again, layout complete. Hopefully that's super helpful. Hopefully that makes it easy to know where everything goes and how to connect everything. But we need to move on to the testing of the harness. So I'm going to pop away a second, make sure everything is in place to do that, and we'll come back and do the testing. So see you in a second. Right guys, we're back now for the testing of the engine harness, and as I said, it's broken up into 2 sections, one with the ignition on and one with the engine actually running. So first thing I'm going to do, let's go through all the tests. Obviously I explain them, why we do them, etc., and then we'll actually jump into the testing with the ignition on straight away. Right, so as it's a plug and play, there's quite a few things we do test, because obviously we want to make sure that the interior stuff in the vehicle is working as it should do. Again, plug and play, we want to make sure everything is working correctly. So first thing we're going to be testing is the immobilizer removal. So again, this is all wired up so the security light and everything does work. Obviously we have physically removed the immobilizer, but the security light will still flash on the dash and everything. So from a person walking past, it'll still look like you have an immobilizer. Just a quick note for you guys, on the 3UZs, only the GS430 2000-2005 has the ability to retain the immobilizer in an IS200 IS200 swap. Okay, on the LS430 and the SC430 and all the other ones, there was a separate computer which was the immobilizer, and that then communicated with the engine ECU. So again, it is not possible to integrate it into an IS200 300 swap, but the GS430 has all the correct wiring, so we could actually retain the immobilizer on a GS430. But we would need you to send us your inner parts of your key. So not the entire key, just the button sections that go in the middle, because that's where the security chip is, okay? So just a heads up for there. But in this case, immobilizer is removed. And obviously we're going to make sure that security light goes off when we insert the key. And I'll explain a bit more detail when we do that test as well. Next up is going to be ambient temperature. Basically outside temperature. It's going to be displayed on the climate control there. We're going to make sure that it is actually reading. Now in this case, it is actually being detected by the ECU. So the little sensor in the front of the car that detects the outside temperature is actually connected to the ECU. It is actually working, so it will go up and down as the temperature changes. Okay. Then we're going to do check engine light, charge light, and oil pressure light. So again, that's all going to be on the cluster. We just want to actually make sure they're light up and that they are actually working. Obviously, when we start the engine, you'll see they'll go out. That's perfect. Obviously, off screen, I do test them by unplugging them, plugging back in again. But again, these videos are already like 40, 50 minutes long, so I'm not going to go through all of that. Next up is going to be reverse. So again, I'm just going to bridge that reverse connector with that little piece of wire you see there. I'm going to keep the IS200 cluster in, and the reason I do that is because the IS200 cluster has a beep when it's in reverse. So I want to make sure that that is working, and that's my visual and audible way of hearing that basically from that connector all the way into the ECU box and all the way into the vehicle, all the connections are correct and it is actually working. Okay. Right, speedo, obviously not applicable in this case because again, he's using a CD009, so we don't have actual speed sensor input that we can test in there. But obviously we test everything else previously to make sure that it's all working in case that ever changed and you didn't want to put a speed sensor in, so that's fine. Then we're going to do OBD2 tests. So basically, again, as per usual, I'm using GTS, which is the global text stream system. Again, this is something that is available to anybody. You don't have to be a mechanic to have it. You can just log on to Toyota-tech.eu if you're in Europe, and also there's Lexus-tech.eu. Anyway, this software is basically, you can pay €7 for a day, €15 for a week, up to like 400 and something for a whole year. And it gives you access to full diagnostics on any Toyota or Lexus vehicle. Okay, so this is basically what the dealerships use. So again, really nice system. You don't have to obviously, you know, it doesn't break the bank. If you want to do a day's diagnostics, you pay €7, which is not really a lot. And then obviously you just need a cable that interfaces with your OBD2 connector, okay? Now in this case, obviously everything, just imagine it's flipped around, Mike. Obviously yours is on this side, but you can see here, I've just got an OBD2 cable connected to the OBD2 port, which would be under your dash. So again, nothing fancy. You could technically take this car to a Lexus or a Toyota dealership and they could plug in their tech stream at the dealership and they would get all the same information as if the car was completely standard, okay? And again, that's super nice because you don't have to go fighting around. Obviously with the remap, we make sure that we have no check engine light on. So again, making sure that that is all working correctly. So if you do have a check engine light on, it is actually a problem that you need to get one of these out, read the codes, or other devices obviously are available. I prefer this one because obviously it's Toyota based system. So again, I have access to everything that I could possibly need. But yeah, that's the OBD2, super simple, straightforward. And obviously want to make sure that we are connecting and everything is reading there. Right, then next up, we're going to do AC clutch and AC request. So I'm going to use GTS to output a signal to activate the AC magnetic clutch relay, which lives there by the ECU box. And then I'm going to go into the climate controls. I'm going to press the AC button, and you're going to see on the live data that's going to go from off to on. Go press it again, and it goes back to off again. So what I'm checking is part of the remap, we changed the MPX data so it communicates properly between the IS300 and the GS430 ECU. So I want to make sure that that's all working as it should. Then that's the last of that one over there. Now, interesting on the brake switch, I will actually explain on the IS300s in the US and the IS300s in Europe as well. They actually had the proper brake switch with 4 wires in. So in this case, it is actually connected correctly. So you'll see on these ones, I do not have a relay like I do on the IS200s, but the IS200s, the manual versions only had a 12 volts when the brake is pressed, and they didn't have it for when the brake is not pressed. So I do have to fit a relay on the IS200s to make sure that system works, but on the IS300s, we do not have to do that. And that's because obviously, even if it is a manual version of the IS300 in the United States that came from 02 to 05, you still have the 4-wire brake switch because you guys were lucky enough to get cruise control on the manual versions. So you still needed the double brake switch, which is used in the cruise control system to tell the ECU when the brakes are not pressed and when they are pressed, okay? So again, there's nothing really to test on there. Obviously, it's just gonna work inside the vehicle. We've connected everything up as it should be, so that's all gonna be gravy, okay? Then obviously, this is for auto, so again, not really worried there. Now, next up is starter circuit, or neutral start switch if it's an auto. Basically, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn the key. If I turn the key inside this vehicle and the engine starts up, then I know everything in there wiring-wise is already all done. Obviously, we've bridged the neutral start switch in there. Obviously, it doesn't really matter whether it's auto or manual. There's still a neutral start switch. Just in the manual versions, they just loop it. And the auto versions, it actually runs to the selector on the side of the gearbox. Okay. Next up is going to be ACIS. So all I'm going to be basically looking for is this little valve here. Should go like that a few seconds after startup. So again, make sure that's working. If you want a good explanation of what that system is, how it works, what it looks like, down in the description, I got a bunch of videos where I do little individual things that you can go look at. If that's not working, you lose a lot of torque, because remember, short intake runner lengths, more horsepower, longer intake runner lengths, more torque. So basically that's what that is. It's basically halving the intake runner length. And obviously it stays in an open position and it closes under control of the ECU via that vacuum solenoid valve that goes underneath the intake there, okay? So basically if it doesn't work, those little flaps inside there are sitting open, which means you have a short intake runner length, so you lose a lot of load on torque, and there's plenty of dyno graphs and so on where you can see just how severe that is. Okay, so please make sure that works, and refer to my previous statement where I said test that vacuum solenoid valve while you've got the intake off, because that's the best time to do it, okay? Drive-by-wire test, simple as it sounds. I've got the pedal here. I'm just going to rev it like that, and you're going to see the engine rev. Obviously, this is a full drive-by-wire system, unlike the 1UZ VVT-i and those ones, and the 2JZ that had kind of like the hybrid. There was still an accelerator cable, but it was actually turning an accelerator position sensor. But there was a small section of override. So if the throttle ever shut down for whatever reason, Obviously, you could push the accelerator cable all the way to the floor and it would open the throttle ever so slightly, enough to get you home, basically like a limp home mode kind of thing. Okay. Oil control valve VVT-i test. So basically with GTS, I can activate the oil control valves for the VVT-i on bank 1 and bank 2. And you'll see when I do that, what happens is the engine is going to go all lumpy as it advances and retards the cam. When I go through it, I'll show you on the screen. It actually tells you what it's doing. But basically, we just want to hear the engine go lumpy and obviously then go unlumpy when I turn the test off. Okay. Then injectors and coils. So what I'm going to do there is I'm just going to go around and I'm going to pull each injector off one by one. The injectors they're not actually clipped in, they're just sitting there because I only have one hand to access them. So again, if I start it up and there's a little bit of misfire, you'll see me running around pushing injectors down. Obviously, they're not clipped in, but it's easier for me to do the test to have it loose like that, so I can just lift it up and push it back down again. Okay. Tacho, simple as it sounds, I'm going to go over to the gauge cluster there and make sure that the tacho is working. Now, as I said, we are changing the signal from 4 to 6 cylinder. I try my best here to get it as accurate as I can, but obviously without the gauge cluster being in the correct position and you sitting in the seat, it is super easy to adjust these. You just open it up, there's a little pot resistor in there, little blue thing, you put a small screwdriver in there and you can change it up and down. Nothing fancy there, there's no buttons to press, you just literally open it up and you can change it. So if you want, you can plug in a diagnostic machine like this, you can check your RPM data and you can adjust that to fine adjusted to exactly how you want it. But again, I try my level best. I try to get myself as much of an angle looking at the cluster as I can, but obviously I can't get it perfect because I'm not able to sit in the seat and obviously check the cluster out from your position. But it should be really, really close. All right. Coolant temp, again, part of the remap. Again, changing that MPX data. We want to make sure that the coolant temperature gauge is reading, because that's one of the things on a GS430 that doesn't work if you were to just plug the ECU into an IS300. So again, making sure that's working and the remap is correct there. Okay, and then lastly, diagnostics. What we want to basically do is make sure that we've got no codes. When we start the engine up, you'll see the check engine light go out, which is perfect. That's what we want to see. And then we want to make sure that we've got no other codes, because remember, part of the remap is removing the entire automatic gearbox from the software, so there'll be no error codes for any missing automatic gearbox, etc. Obviously, the remap does a lot as well. We make the throttle more responsive. We add more power, especially like sort of low to mid range. Yeah, there's a bunch of other stuff that we do in there as well. But yeah, that's one of the main things about making it plug and play, is to make sure that everything works as it should do, as if Toyota built this. And yeah, check engine light works, everything works. Okay, right, so that's all the tests we're going to be doing. So let's jump into the first test, and that's going to be the immobilizer removal. Okay, now I've done a couple of videos on the immobilizer system with Toyotas and Lexuses, and just to clear anything up, the immobilizer is built into the ECU. It's not built into the car. You do have central locking and an alarm, which you have your buttons for. That's a completely separate system altogether. They don't talk to each other. They don't care what each other is doing. You could literally, if you had the correct key in with the immobilizer chip in on a vehicle that's standard, you could literally open the door, the alarm would be going wild. You could put the key in the ignition, turn it on, and the car will start. So again, they don't talk to each other. They don't care what each other's doing. Completely separate systems. Now then, when you have a system like this, it'll be like 3UZ-FE VVT-i, GS430, 2005, IS300 with the 2JZ, IS200, etc. They all share the same system. So basically what's going to happen is the actual ECU, if it had an immobilizer, obviously, would read the key the second you inserted the key, okay? There is actually a physical wire, a ground going to the ECU to tell it to activate the what they call the plus B circuit, and that then energizes the antenna to read the key. So in other words, you don't even need to move the key to the on position for it to read the actual chip and make the security light go out. And I'm going to demonstrate that for you now. So basically all I'm going to do is I'm going to literally insert the key. And this is going to be annoying because you can see there, you can see the security light flashing. Let's see if I can get everything in the same shot, but 3, 2, 1. Now, I don't know if you can hear it, but you can actually hear the relay in that fuse box over there, in which case, if it was an American car, it'd be here. You can actually hear it click. The ECU, without even turning the ignition on, is actually turned on the circuit that supplies plus B, not only to the antenna, but also to the ECU as well. But that's how that works. That's why the security light goes out the second you insert the key, okay? Obviously, as I said, in this case, the immobilizer is removed, but I keep everything working like that. So if someone's walking by the car, you still have the security light flashing, nobody's any the wiser, and they'll think that you still have an immobilizer in the vehicle. Okay, right, so that's cool. Let's turn the ignition on and make our way over to the ambient temperature. And you can see there 14 degrees centigrade. Obviously in America it would be in Fahrenheit, but they're all working exactly as we expected to. And let's move back over to here, and you probably already saw, but we've got check engine light over there, we've got battery light, and we've got oil light. Okay, while I'm here, I've obviously removed the low oil level bulb for two reasons. One, a lot of the engines I put on here don't have low oil level. Number two is obviously, even though this does, I can't obviously plug it in because it's in the wrong place, okay? But that should still work as normal. So the yellow or orange, some people call it low oil level light, that will work 100%. What you do need to remove is the VSC TRC bulbs, okay? They're just gonna continually flash in your face, okay? So even though the IS300 had a very similar system to the GS430, it's not exactly the same. The communication is different. So obviously the VSC and TRC system is not going to work. However, that does not affect your ABS. Your ABS is completely separate. It's its own system. It would work even with no engine or ECU in the vehicle. So again, that system should still work 100%. Nothing changes there whatsoever. Okay. Right, so let's pop over to the list and see where we're moving on to next. So we've done ambient temp, check engine light, charge light, oil pressure, reverse. Nice and simple. So again, as soon as I connect these together, which I can hopefully do with, there you go, you can hear that annoying beeping sound. Perfect. And as you can see, the reason I push a wire into the end there is I'm checking the crimps on the terminals to make sure that they're okay. Crimps on these ones over here, make sure that they're okay, and so on. That's why I push a wire into there, because I know that everything is working 100% and I don't have a loose crimp or anything like that going on there. Right, next up is OBD2 test. Okay, so I've already connected to the system. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into System Select. We're going to choose Engine and ECT, or Electronic Control Transmission, because remember on the 5-speed it's all built into one. Interesting fact, on the 6 speeds, even though it is built into the same ECU, when you communicate with it, you do actually choose separately the gearbox and the engine ECU. If you ever watch one of my videos with 6 speeds on. Right, okay, so let's go to data list. And we should see a bunch of data showing up here. Obviously, it is showing that it is a GS430 UZS. And give it a second, because this old K-line communication is not super fast. There you go. So you can see we've got intake air temperature 16 degrees. And what else have we got useful? There you go. Coolant temperature 33 degrees. Remember, I have started this a bit, so it's not going to show on the dash until it gets above sort of 40 degrees. But yeah, so we can see we got live data there, so that's absolutely great. So let's move on to the next thing. So let's do AC clutch. So what I want to do now is go into active test. We want to go to AC magnetic clutch relay. And I'm going to keep quiet. Hopefully you can hear that. Perfect. So the ECU is able to activate the AC magnetic clutch relay, which supplies 12 volts to the AC compressor over there. So that's perfect. Right, so the next thing we want to do is we want to do the AC request. So again, as part of the change in the MPX data, we want to make sure that that request from the vehicle is being transmitted to the ECU. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get my little list up that I've saved in here for testing. And there it is. We've got AC signal is currently off. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and press the AC button on the climate control. And we can see AC signal is now on. Perfect. So that means the actual car is communicating to the ECU and it's telling it I want aircon on. Obviously the ECU makes other decisions like the pressure switch, like the lock sensor in the AC magnetic clutch itself. So again, there's other things that go on in the background, but I just want to make sure that the actual signal from the car to the ECU is correct, and then let the ECU take over from there. Okay, right. So that's pretty much it with the ignition on testing. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to run the engine to get it up to temperature, just so we can see some coolant temperature. I'm not going to let it get like full hot, because what I also want to do is I want to make sure that once I've had the engine running for a while, that you can see that the needle has actually gone up, obviously to show that it is actually working. So bear with me a minute. It'll be a second for you, but we're back in a second with a slightly warmer engine. Right, so we're back again, and we're going to be doing the engine running testing. So I'm going to do a very brief, quick recap of what we're going to be testing. Then let's get the engine started up and carry out those tests. So first thing, starter circuit, basically making sure it starts on the key. ACIS, we're going to pop over to that valve, make sure that she closes after start. Drive-by-wire test, we're obviously going to just rev the engine up with that. Oil control valve, pop over back to the laptop and do those 2 oil control valve tests for each bank. Catches and coils, going to run around and unplug each injector one by one. Tacho, just go to the custom, make sure that works. Coolant temperature, when I start the car now, you'll see what the temperature is at, and then obviously we'll go up from there. and then diagnostics, make sure we got no DTC or diagnostic trouble codes on the ECU. So without further ado, obviously you'd get in your car, turn the key on. Fantastic, okay. And hopefully you saw that valve go down. That's brilliant, so that's the ACIS test done. Let's move over to drive-by-wire. Happy with that. Right, oil control valve tests. Right, so we're going to go into active test. VVT-i control bank 1. So you can see exactly what it's going to do there. Right, let's go to bank 2. Perfect, okay. Right, let's go to injectors and coils. So we'll start here, number 7, number 5, number 3, and the one that's always a pain, number 1. Cool. Let's go over to the other side. Number 8, number 6, number 4, and number 2. Perfect, okay. You can see we've got no check engine light, no battery light, no oil light. You can see that our tacho is working, and it is pretty correct. You can see our coolant temperature gauge is going up. Come back in a second and see that one up a bit more. Right, okay, so that's that. Right, let's just pop over to DTCs. And you can see we've got basically no trouble codes whatsoever. So let me just turn the key off quickly. Right, put those down there. Okay, fantastic. So let's just see if the coolant temperature went up a little bit. Yeah, it did go up there for a second. Perfect. Okay, so that's brilliant. Right, so everything is working as I expected to. Obviously, all the tests we've carried out are brilliant. And everything is 100% super happy with that. Right, we've got no diagnostic codes. That's obviously super important, okay? Now then, in terms of the diagnostics, with all US ECUs, even from 1UZ VVT-i, you cannot do the system where you could bridge those two terminals and you get the check engine light to flash. That was removed from the US ECUs far back as 98. So basically, you're going to have a diagnostics equipment of some sort to plug into your OBD2 port to read any codes that may be there. So if your check engine light does come on, there is a problem that needs to be sought after. You need to get a diagnostic machine, you need to plug it in, and you need to see what codes are going to what codes come up when you're doing the diagnostics. Okay, right. But when you bridge those two terminals, so in your case, it could be at the diagnostic port, the OBD2 port, you can basically bridge ground and TC, okay? Now, that basically, what it's gonna do is gonna put the ECU into a diagnostic mode. There is one useful thing that you can do with that on these particular setups. Obviously, you can't read codes, not gonna flash check engine light, but what it would do is it does actually put the engine at 10 degrees of timing. It locks it at 10 degrees of timing. Now, obviously, if you're having weird issues and you think it may be related towards the timing, this is a really nice, quick, easy way to do a test. You don't have to take any covers off. You don't have to do anything. You get a paper clip, you get a timing light, and basically you wrap it around coil 1. Now, obviously, my one does work just wrapping around the wires. If yours doesn't, obviously you can pull the coil out. You can get a bogey cord or a spark lead or HT lead or whatever you call it where you are, and you can connect it between the coil and the spark plug, and you can wrap your clamp around there. And if you have a look on your front casing over here, obviously I've painted it white so it's nice and visible. You've got 0, 5, 10, and 15 degrees of timing. On your crank pulley, let's see if we got lucky and it's close by. Let's see what's on the other side there. There it is. So you can see where I've painted it white, okay? That mark is also for something else to do with changing the timing belt. If you want the manual how to change timing belt, you'll know what that mark does over there. But anyway, so timing light, clamp around coil 1, and you can check that the timing is at 10 degrees. If it's not, then you can start pulling the covers off and actually checking the mechanical timing, okay? It's just a really nice, easy way to check the timing without having to go through all the rigmarole of pulling all the covers and everything off and actually checking by turning the motor over by hand and then lining up all the marks, okay? Super simple. But the caveat is, if you leave that paperclip in there, obviously what's going to happen is you're going to lock the timing at 10 degrees and you're going to have a bad time. It's going to have no power. It's going to feel really sluggish. So please make sure if you are doing that you do pull out the paperclip after that. Obviously in the IS300, I think when you put the paperclip in as well, when it goes into diagnostic mode, your dash is going to go like a Christmas tree. Although your check engine light's not going to flash, you're probably going to see your ABS light flashing. All types of weird stuff is going to be going on there. Okay. Right. But that's pretty much it, guys. Super happy with everything. Been through the layout so the customer knows exactly where to plug everything in. Been through all the testing to make sure that everything inside the car is going to work. So it's like I said, it is a plug and play swap. And obviously made sure that the ECU is running correctly in terms of obviously having no diagnostic codes for things like the missing automatic gearbox or any of that type of jazz as well. So again, let's get this off to Mike in the US so he can get his thing in there. I know he's itching to get going. So yeah, we'll get that done, get it off sent to him. If you guys have any questions, please let us know down in the comments. I try to get them as often as I can. And yeah, you can also find us on Facebook. You can message us there. And you can also email us at info@phoenixenginemanagement.com. Okay, and yeah, you can submit any questions or anything you have there. I do have a video if you guys want to submit queries that I usually send to you first, because it helps me get all the info that we need before we go further, so we don't go, backwards and forwards with sort of 20 questions trying to figure out exactly what's going on. But yeah, that's how you can get hold of us. And if you have any other questions, put comments down below if there's anything you'd like to know, and I'll try and get to you as quickly as I can. I also like the comments because sometimes you guys have questions and I can do a video on it and explain something that, there's things that you don't know that I just think everybody knows. So yeah, ask questions below, and then if I can, I'll do a video on it to explain it in greater detail. But as always, thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you again soon.